Welcome to the Spinning Our Gears podcast. Before we begin, a quick reminder. All views, issues, and opinions are solely those of the hosts and their guests and do not reflect the opinions or positions of any department, agency, city, county, municipality, state, or country, or any other organization. This show is rated E for explicit. Listening and viewer discretion is highly advised. Spinning Our Gears is a law enforcement leadership and mental health podcast. We confront the issues and conversations others are afraid to deal with. Leadership failures, the culture within law enforcement, accountability, and the realities of life on and off the job. You can find us on YouTube, all of the major podcasting platforms and social media outlets, as well as online at spinningourgears.com. And now, without further fanfare, this is the Spinning Our Gears podcast.
Spinning our gears. Admin talks and broken plans, doing the best that we can. Jokes on shift, truth off mic, trying to live a normal life. Mental health ain't weakness, no, it's the stuff we learn as we go. Say it out loud, make it clear, this job don't own us here. So tune it in, don't disappear when it all gets heavy here. Real talk, real voices clear, spinning our gears, podcast is here.
What is going on, Warriors, and welcome back to another episode of the Spinning Our Gears podcast. Want to thank Monsters Unleashed over on YouTube for the song you just heard coming in. It is the new theme song for the Spinning Our Gears podcast. Have to give them a shout out every single time. I think they're doing amazing work. That being said, we have a very awesome episode coming forward here with you. Very special guest, Andrea Wilson, is joining us today. I happen to know Andrea for a long time. We used to work together, and we had to get her on the podcast because of a lot of the stuff she's doing right now. So, Andrea, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. A little bit of the background. Yeah, like I said, Andrea and I worked together for about, 6 years, 7 years?
Yeah, I left in 17.
Somewhere around there. She's been retired for almost 9 years now.
9 years in July.
Yeah. So just her story is kind of incredible. We're going to cover part of that, but then also where she's at right now is amazing. And I think that's the more important part. Andrea, give the listeners a little bit about your background in law enforcement, how it got started, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, so many years ago, I started in security at a hospital. And I don't know if anybody out there has done that, but that is hard work. So I started there, and then I transitioned in to be a correctional officer at the Anamosa State Penitentiary. Did that for a while, but my heart was always like I wanted to be a law enforcement officer. So I became a reserve officer for 3 years until I was hired full-time at our agency. Was there for 15 years and kind of went from patrol to trying to figure out what you want to do. Is it drugs or is it, whatever. I ended up child abuse, sex abuse, child and infant deaths, and fatal car accident investigator. And so that's kind of how I ended my career. And throughout the time, I was with Honor Guard and FTO, and I loved the experience that I had. But I am happy to be out and helping the next generation.
Right.
First responders.
Give us a little bit about the correctional side of things. I don't think we've ever had, we've had like me who's been in the jail, but I don't think we've ever had anyone who's worked inside of a prison kind of give the listeners the rundown of what that's like compared to law enforcement, and especially a female in corrections.
Yeah, I think everybody should work in either a jail or a prison. I always tell my students that. The Anamosa was unique because the building is just, it's old, but it's really beautiful. It's a different world. It's a world inside, it's total institution is what you call it, right? So it's a little mini world inside the walls of the prison. They have everything. They operate their whole entire life inside the walls. And so you're getting them on a good day or a bad day, just like we would have, right? It's an all-male institution. Obviously, it's male-dominated as far as the correctional officers. And so you do run into male inmates trying to catcall you or trying to, whatever. And you don't realize it until you experience it. You don't know. They always warn you in the academy, well, be careful of this, and you don't know. I remember one guy, like, it was like my first week in, he's like, CO, come here, I gotta tell you something. And so I walked over to his cell, and he's like, hey, they're planning to kill you. I just heard them out in the yard, and they're planning on killing you. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I went and told, and the captain said, come with me. We're going back to talk to him. So we go back to his cell, and they start ripping him a new one. And I'm like, what? He's telling you guys are going to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, they're trying to get close to you.
Yeah.
I was like, dang it. I failed
Now,
week 1. But you deal with, like, you have to watch them shower, for example, or pass the meds, and they're always, it's a violation of the rule, but they'll stand there nude in front of you. And it's just, it's an interesting culture in there. I personally never experienced any male officers at the prison indicate that I couldn't do the job. I never did. I was fortunate in that. They were all wonderful to me, and it was a great experience, something I'd never do again.
right. Well, it's certainly something, a different time frame. You had to prove yourself in many different ways. I think that you kind of hit it on the head. Yeah, they all do have good and bad days, but at the same time, they're in the worst situation of their lives. So it's almost like every day is a bad day for the people that you're looking after. And you're right, there is the tricks they play and the games they play, but then at the same time, that same institution had, a correctional officer that was killed here in the past 5-6 years now. So it is definitely, something that is possible out there and something you have to constantly watch your back. But I also think that you're 100% right. Every law enforcement personnel should start their career either in a jail or a correctional setting. You learn how to have command presence and how to talk to people and how to get yourself through situations that many don't know, many have never experienced before. It definitely takes the robotics out of law enforcement. So kind of give us that transition from corrections into law enforcement. If I'm correct, I guess correct me if I'm wrong, you were the only female at the agency at that time, correct?
In the police agency?
Yes.
No, there was one when I was there, and
Okay.
then she left, and I don't remember kind of the way about. I stayed in corrections for a while, and I have a son who's going to be 26 this year. Actually, his father worked at the prison as well, and he got stabbed 9 times, and by an inmate that just wanted to kill a guard that day. And so through that whole process and the trial, and I got out of corrections and transitioned over to law enforcement, which I knew I would anyway. But there was one female at the police department, and I don't think he ever worked with her because she left, and she was wonderful. I loved her. But day 1 that I was there, and they had me kind of with her, and she'd show me around, right? So, female with a female. And day 1, I found myself in an internal investigation. The first day.
Okay.
Because a male commander made some comments to her, and I happened to be there.
Okay.
And so day 1, they're like, hey, the captain wants to see you. And so I had to go into the captain's office, and they're like, well, sorry, this is not the way you want to start your career, but you're involved in an internal, and we need to know what you heard.
This isn't how it normally goes, although it seems like more and more it is how it goes, yeah. What... I don't know how to really phrase this question. Obviously, Erica's a co-host, and we talked to her a lot about it, but what are some of the biggest challenges you face as a female in law enforcement, especially during the time frame that you got in, where it was very few and far between to see a strong female in charge of things?
Yeah, I definitely come with a strong personality, sometimes to a fault, but I think they recognize that. The problem I experienced at that agency was that they all wanted to be my protector.
Okay.
And so if we would go on a call, they wouldn't let me handle it. They would step in. And I'm like, I got this. If you just let me talk to them, we don't have to go hands-on. So I dealt with a lot of that. But then I also dealt with a lot of harassment throughout my career. I was there 15 years. And which contributed to why I had to get out of law enforcement. But I would say the overall main thing I dealt with from at least the first 5 years was the males just trying to be my protector.
Okay. Do you, and we don't necessarily have to go down, do you feel like that the harassment part of it was because of the size of the agency and the, I guess, close-knit, I don't want to even call it close-knit, but just the size of the agency and how everyone knew everything, or from your networking connections, did you see that in other agencies as well?
It's absolutely everywhere, but it's to what extent does the administration allow it to happen?
Mm-hmm.
The problem was most of it was coming from the administration.
Okay.
It was a captain at the time or my sergeant at the time. There was, full disclosure, there was a time where I was at the gas pumps. I mean, you know what the gas pumps, right? At the
Mm-hmm.
shift, you go load up or fill up your car. And I'm at the gas pumps, and my sergeant, this was my first year on, my sergeant, who I had known since I was 16 years old, doesn't make it right, reached in my car and rubs between my legs. My sergeant. My camera happened to be on. This was way before your time, right? We had VHS tapes in the back of the trunks. I don't know if anybody has had those. With this big thing, and you put the VHS tape in the back, and that's how it records. So about once a week, you had to change the tape out, and you could see how much tape you had on. Well, I was ahead a traffic stop. I forgot to turn off my camera. It happens, and it was a brand new week, brand new tape. I left it on, and I was angry. I called my friend immediately after, told her everything that happened. Camera was still on. Turned the camera off, and I didn't turn it on purpose. It was just left on. The next day I come into shift, and I have a new tape.
Shocker.
I know.
Shocker. There's no corruption in law enforcement, right? Just the admin part of it.
Right.
So, females that deal with all of this, they've got the harassment that goes on. They have the stress of being a female in law enforcement, very few and far between. There's this weird kind of, I guess, aura that I like to talk about where it just seems like females are so rough and rude to other females in law enforcement. What causes that? I don't understand it. Eric has talked about it a little bit, but I want to get another perspective of why does that happen?
I think it's competition. Like, females
Okay.
in general are very competitive within one another, right? They have to be the female that's noticed. They have to be the female that's first. They have to be the female that's best. Sometimes they have to be the female that all the guys notice. I just wanted to be a cop, right? And so I was like, just leave me alone. That's all I want. I am definitely not the person that says, I am female, hear me roar. That is not me. I wanted to be equal within the agency. I didn't want to be different. I wanted to be one of the guys. But when you get a certain type of personality with a female, they don't even become friends. Instant enemies. Oh, we're hiring a female? I hate her.
Yeah.
And you see that. And I think we were pretty good with a couple of us. There may be other ones that we just maybe didn't agree with. But there was 3 of us that I would say, there's one I still talk to all the time from the department. So,
Yeah. I think,
figure out who they are.
I guess from, my perspective of things, I think there's a certain level of, females can suss out females just like males can do the same to males. And you can kind of, pick it up in the first couple of days of the motives of the people that you're talking to.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, sitting back, you could definitely tell there were certain, like, these guys are good with one another and these two are not. And it's going to be an issue and you better keep them as far apart as you can or it's going to really blow up. But moving on throughout, I think the entire time that I was there working with you, you were in the detective bureau. When did that change take place? And kind of give us that.
I got hired in 2002, and in 2010, they created this position for corporal to try to prepare people for the next level of law enforcement. I knew personally I never wanted to be a sergeant. I never wanted to go above detective because I felt like you got out of the job that I really wanted to do, maybe later in my career. But I also didn't want the rotating shifts because back then it was, I think, 2 years you would rotate through the shifts as sergeants. I didn't want to do that. I had a family. And so it is kind of different with females too, because a lot of times we are the primary caregiver for the children. And it's not discounting males in any way. but we are, and we can get into that when I talk about some of the trauma that females experience. It's different, but um, so I was the first female to be promoted in the department's history. So I went to corporal in 2010, but they had me as a corporal on the street, and so I did that gig for a while until somebody retired, and they said, "Come into the bureau." And then right away they're like, well, they did tell me, they're like, "We want you to work the child pornography cases, the ICAC." And I said, "Nope, put me back on the street." And they're like, "Well, how about we do the sex abuse?" And I said, "Okay." So I did the sex abuse and child abuse, but I still had to work some of those ICAC cases. And I just was there until I retired.
And that's, part of what I want to hit on. Obviously, one of the pillars of this show is mental health. In law enforcement, we kind of have that, I don't know if I want to call it a problem, but we often stick the female detective on those calls because in some case, in some regards, absolutely you guys are much better at handling those calls than men. But at the same time, it's not fair because you guys are catching all of that all of the time. What are some of the things that you dealt with? Obviously, we know you had to retire at a certain point. What are some of the things that you had to deal with trauma-wise, physically, all of the things that happened when you were, fielding all of those investigations?
I didn't know I was experiencing them until I got out, first of all. I would agree with you. They a lot of times try to stick the females on those cases. We had a great investigator who, he's still at the department as a sergeant, who worked those cases before me. And before him, it was another, he ended up as a lieutenant. He had to retire too. And so we're starting to see the pattern. But I got in there in I think it was about February of 2011 is when I started investigations. And right away, I got a sex abuse case with a small child, and I had zero training on it. None at all. And so I know this is a high profile, high stakes case with a very vulnerable victim, and I have no training. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. They're like, go to the Child Protection Center. Okay, where is that? Right, let's start there. And so after a while, and I will say we were blessed at our agency at that time. We could go through a lot of trainings if we put in for it. They usually sent us, and so I will say that. So I was able to get some trainings in and really specialized in that area.
Another quick break from your boy Turk. Wanted to talk about Imposters on the Throne, Warriors in the Shadows, Exposing Poor Leadership Tactics During Tough Times. It's the book that I wrote, and right now it is on Amazon for the cheapest price that it's ever been. This promotion is going to be ending here soon, so I highly suggest you hop on Amazon, buy the book now, because prices are going to be going up. But book 2 is currently in the works, so you got to get yourself this thing, read it, and get prepared for book 2. It's coming your way sooner rather than later. I got a life, a lot of things going on. It will be done soon, though, I promise. All right. Hey, yeah, that's it. Back to the show.
What I didn't realize was what it was doing to my body. And it was terrible. Everything started to hurt. I started to get extreme headaches. I couldn't sleep, but then I was tired all the time. And part of that was because of the boss that we had. We were on call 24/7, and if you didn't answer your phone, he would call you in and say, if, like maybe 3 a.m, you don't answer, he'll call you in the office the next morning and say, maybe you want to go find another job. So I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating right, I was risky behavior. I got a divorce. And I think that's something that a lot of people, I mean, it's known, like they're like, oh, cops get divorces. I married a firefighter, and we never talked about the trauma that we both experienced or the calls, that we would go on together. So all my anger and bitterness and lack of sleep, lack of consistent schedule, it all contributed to my relationship issues at home. Everything I experienced at work followed me home, and I give that the credit for the divorce. I feel a lot of guilt with that because I didn't recognize the signs earlier, but back then, we didn't talk about this.
Right.
So over the years, we've learned to talk about it more, but I would go home. This is the first time I've said this out loud. I would go home on my lunch break and sleep because I could not keep my eyes open. I think the call, and I do a talk that says the career that broke my heart. which was the elementary case that I had like 18 CPC videos. So I had somebody come into a elementary school and sexually abuse a kindergarten class. And I did that case by myself, even though I asked for help. They required me to take answer my phone 24/7, take a notebook home, and be there for all the parents who might call, because dispatch was going to give them my number, and it killed me.
Yeah.
So.
I want to stick up for Andrea here too, because it sounds like sour grapes, but at the same time, Andrea has won multiple awards for the work that she's put in to CPCs, to child abuse cases, and that just kind of goes to show the effort she was putting into it, and probably leading to a lot of burnout. Am I right?
Yeah, that was my heart, and I put everything into it. There's so much wonderful research out there about how females internalize stress differently from males. Actually, 80% of autoimmune diseases are females, have the 80% of them, because they take on and internalize all this stress that causes all this inflammation, which leads to disease. When males are feeling stressed in the same environment, women take on their stress as well. And so it just increases the symptoms.
So you talked about asking for help with these cases and not getting it. Do you feel that was ignorance? Do you feel that it was harassment? Why do you think that you weren't given the help that, I mean, like you talked about, there were multiple kids that were abused in this one class. The idea of one investigator handling that just kind of blows my mind. Why do you think that occurred?
I don't know. The sergeant followed me out to my car. I was off duty, and he followed me out to the parking lot. He's like, "Hey, we just got a really bad case. I need you on it." And I was like, "All right, what is it?" Because that happened all the time. They said, "Tell me," and it's an elementary school. Somebody came in and abused a bunch of children. And I said, "Okay, do you have who are the victims? Who are they?" So they tell me the names. I said, I can't take that case. I know some people involved, which happens when you're in a smaller town. I grew up in this town, so I knew a lot of people. And he just looked at me and goes, "You have to take this case. You're the only one who can work it." And so I think it's a failure of the department to train other people. And other people could work the sex abuse cases, but this was a complex case. I did reach out to DHS, Health and Human Services now, and because of the parameters, they couldn't accept the case. So it was just me.
Right.
And I think I got that in October of 16, and I don't think I slept consistently until I retired in July of 17.
You're right. Absolutely. Training needs to take place. And you talked about how the department we worked at, if you wanted it, you could get it. But I think the failure across all of law enforcement is there's so few pre-planning. There's so few succession plans. And it's almost always on the officer to find the training they want to go to. Yeah. And there's no command staff saying, "Hey, this would be a good one for you. You should go to this one and take it." It's the complete opposite. So there's a lot of people like you that were out there kind of, steering a rudderless ship, or, battling the waves all by yourself. So do you feel like there was a certain level of burnout where it started to affect the work that you were putting out towards the end there?
Yeah, I had 53 open cases when I left. 53. You cannot work those cases. But the problem was, I would get the cases that the lieutenant would assign, which was typical. The sergeant or lieutenant in the bureau would come in and hand you a file, and that was your case. But I would also get calls from officers on the street, especially the SROs, that say, "Hey, I got an abuse here, I need you to come out." So I would go get those. But then I would also get calls straight from DHS or other agencies, because they knew I worked those cases, so then I would get those. And there wasn't a great tracking system. I think they tried when I was leaving to kind of start tracking cases, but they didn't realize that it was just getting piled on. And so I would have to try to somehow figure out, how am I going to work these cases? Okay, I got to get the really, really bad ones. Well, every time I got done with a really bad one, another really bad one came in. So all these other, I don't want to say less significant, because they're all significant cases, they kept getting pushed to the back.
Right.
And I was never getting caught up. And to the point where when I retired, it was to my understanding that some of the people in the bureau said, "Well, Andrea just didn't work her cases." Andrea couldn't work her cases.
You're right. They're not less significant, but at the same time, what I've seen from my experience across multiple agencies and with a lot of different contacts is that when you start to get to a smaller agency, the command staff tries to justify their position or show how well they're doing through stats. And so you get a lot of these theft calls where the patrol officer knows it's not going anywhere, but for some reason the command staff in the bureau decides to still assign it to a detective. So when you've got 30 and 40 cases on your caseload, knowing that half of those are not going to go anywhere, of course you're going to prioritize the more important call over that dead theft call. So, you're experiencing the burnout, you're experiencing the stress, you're not sleeping well. Eventually this leads to your retirement. Kind of talk about what you feel comfortable talking about with the retirement.
Yeah, I'm open book with this because my hope is that if I tell my story, somebody else will recognize the signs earlier before it gets to what I went through. Like I said, I got that case in October 16. I also went back to college in October of 16. One day I was like, I need to go get my degree. And so I started kind of the same month. I remember still in October that we were driving down the street and I just kind of felt funny, a little off. And so I felt my pulse and it was just erratic. It was not right. I was like, well, I might have to get that checked. But I was very stubborn. I'm still stubborn, but less stubborn. And I was like, somebody told me, you have to go. Like, that's not right. They felt it. And so I went the next day to my doctor, and she's like, nope, heart doctor right now. And so I literally left her office and went straight to the heart doctor that she called. And the heart doctor I went to, he's like, no, you need an electrophysiologist because yours is electrical. I said, okay. So then this whole process took a while. Well, the doctor that came in, she's like, well, where are your grandparents from? And I was like, they're all from here. And she's like, well, great grandparents. And I was like, Italy. And she goes, yep. And I was like, what does that mean? She's like, well, I need to get you a cardiac MRI, but I think you have something called ARVC. And that's all she would say. But she's like, it kind of started in Italy. So if your relatives are from Italy, that's probably why. I'm like, okay. So I leave there, and I did the worst possible thing. I started Googling what ARVC was. And apparently, that's where you just drop dead. You just die. And so this whole time I'm thinking, so I leave this, I find this ARVC, I start doing research, and it's bad. And so I don't tell my son, who's at that time 16. I just keep it in, which is probably the worst thing to do, right? I told my mom, I told my sister who's a nurse, and we're just trying to figure out, do I have this? Well, insurance wouldn't pay for the MRI. Shocker.
Yeah.
Well, at that time, we had a chief that didn't last long in our agency, and I wasn't ready to tell people what the doctors had told me because it wasn't confirmed, and I hadn't dealt with it myself, so I kept it quiet. And nobody knew I was going through this, where this lady's like, yeah, this is probably what you have. And you're probably going to die and leave your son without a mom. Those are the things I'm thinking. I went and I applied for light duty because they said, you have to keep your heart rate under 100. Because if you don't keep your heart rate under 100, you're going to increase the risk of dying. And I'm like, fantastic. So I applied for light duty and I got it. But then they really started asking questions. And I just told them, I said, I'm not ready to talk about this. And so that same captain that I met at the gas pumps cornered me in the basement one day and said, I just have to let you know that we can't see your injuries, so we really don't think it's real.
And, okay, there's so much to break down here because legally it's your right to say, I don't want to disclose it. I have a medical issue that I don't want to tell you what it is. My doctor is signing off on it, and you have to follow what my doctor is saying. At the same time, very similar time frame, actually, we had another coworker that was going through heart issues and was trying to apply for early retirement. And it was denied. He was told by the doctor, well, just don't get in a situation where your heart rate will jump up. And, the coworker was like, well, how am I supposed to do that? If I go to a bar fight, how am I supposed to keep my heart rate down? And he was basically told, just don't go to the bar fight. So these are some of the things that she's dealing with at that time, some of the, call it stigma if you want to call it that, but the battles that she's facing, not only with the doctor side of things, where we know that doctors really have no bedside manner. They can't talk to people like law enforcement can. And then she's also going into the 4 square walls where you're supposed to feel safe. And the number 2 and the number 1 through the number 2 is telling her, we don't believe you and we're not going to give you that support.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny that you say, okay, don't go to the bar fight. The research out there shows that the stress of a police officer starts long before you get into the building, right? It can start when you're getting in your car to go to work or when you're putting on your uniform, whether you put it on at home or whatever. That's when the stress begins. That's when your heart rate increases. It's not when you just get to the bar fight. And so that's that's something that the agencies have to really start to research and understand for their people.
And at the officer level too, we're all creatures of habit, and guilty as charged here. The energy drinks and the coffee and the eating habits and the sleeping habits that sometimes we can't control. When you're adding all of that onto your heart and your brain, when you're dealing with things like she dealt with, you're setting yourself up for disaster, and you really need to be aware of that. So, okay, we're moving through this. You're dealing with a captain you've already had issues with, who's not having your back. It eventually moves to the medical retirement in 2017, correct? Is that what you said?
Yeah, but even before that, before I got full retirement, and it was one of the fastest retirements they'd seen go through. I knew I was going for that, and so I just started collecting my doctor stuff. If you're out there and you're preparing for retirement, get all your medical records ahead of time. Put them in a book, be organized. Organize it like a case. But one day I got called into the office where number 1 was there with my boss and told me, if you don't come back to work, I'm firing you. And I was like, I didn't say much at that meeting, but I just go, I don't think you can do that. And he's like, well, then you're going back to the street. And I go, I don't think you can do that either. And he told me, I said, look, they still didn't know the seriousness of my illness or what we thought it was. But I just said, look, I need to get this cardiac MRI, and I'm waiting for insurance to approve it. But they're not approving it. And he goes, then get a credit card. That's what they're for. I always remember that. So when I left work that day at 4 o'clock, I went straight to the fire station because my heart I thought I was dying right then. Go to the fire station, they hook me up, and they're like, push meds, ambulance is coming hot. They're like, she needs to get to the hospital right now. It was bad.
Yeah.
Admin talks and broken plans, doing the best that we can. Jokes on shift, truth off mic, trying to live a normal life. Mental health ain't weakness, no, it's the stuff we learn as we go. Say it out loud, make it clear, this job don't own us here. So tune it in, don't disappear when it all gets heavy here. Real talk, real voices clear, spinning our gears, but chest is here. It's spinning our gears.